back to another Just 5 Mins. It's going to be a weekend ramble, I think. Number 6. So you can turn off now if you really don't have the time or inclination to listen to David just ramble on about stuff that probably everybody already knows, to be honest. But anyway, you never know. There might be something new. So obviously there's so much, movement in AI. There's all, talk of AI bubble bursting and all that sort of stuff. And, the usual noise, basically, isn't it? I mean, it is. I was watching a video a few days ago about, is it Colossus, I think, in America, where they're building, there's Colossus and Colossus 2 or something, massive AI data centers. But, quite, I'll find the link, actually, because it was a really interesting video. Because it was actually a woman who actually builds chips, basically, and got her own chip startup and stuff like that. So she knows what she's talking about. But it was just the detail of how essentially these sort of tech companies, AI companies, are essentially becoming, massive utility companies, like for power and water, because that's what is needed. Like I think this Colossus one, it's got, I can't remember, did she say 1 million of the brand new GPUs from NVIDIA or something? And they're all liquid cooled as well. So there's all, I mean, the engineering alone, forget about the planet and, all that sort of stuff at the moment. I mean, because that's the thing, isn't it? It is eating so much power and stuff. But keep that aside just for a second. I know it's important, but this one was somewhere near on the border of Mississippi, and I can't remember where exactly it was. You'd think I'd get the video in front of me, but anyway, they ended up having to reclaim this old power station and ship these gas turbines from Europe. But then, actually, I was quite impressed, actually, because it's the Mississippi River or something. This is obviously this is happening all over the world anyway, but this was just one example. And the amount of water that's required for all the cooling and all that sort of stuff. You thought, oh, crikey, are they going to start draining the Mississippi River and all this? But they did quite a clever thing where they're taking, essentially recycling used water, wastewater, essentially, and, using that. But the fact that, all of these massive AI data centers are becoming, they've got their own, power stations. That's why when you really read into the news about all of these, like Microsoft, Google, and all that sort of stuff, they're just on the hunt for all this, extra power. So, and obviously they've got the money to be able to go and say, well, we'll build our own, power station, whether it be nuclear or whatever. And I know there's a lot of, controversy around all of that. And at the same time, it is quite mad, isn't it? That, I mean, there are some, don't get me wrong, I'm not even going to go at AI, because it's an amazing time. It's an amazing evolution that we're going through. And therein lies the point, isn't it? We're in an expanding universe, and, nothing really stays still. So, might as well just grab hold and, do the best you can, obviously, not try to destroy the planet. But anyway, but it's not a conversation about that, because there's too much in that in itself, isn't there? But anyway, yeah, it was just incredible. And then obviously you've got all these tools like Sora from, OpenAI. They had their OpenAI Dev Day where Sora 2 has been released, like VO3 from Google, and of course there's a lot of slop basically being generated. Some of it's quite funny, I must admit. I do enjoy it, but the realism and everything else, we're just getting almost numbed to that. But again, the internet, the data planet, basically is just filling up, isn't it, with all of this stuff? But anyway, it's always a double-edged sword, isn't it? It's like all the other stuff. Nuclear, can be used in a very positive way or a very negative way, and same with all of this. Same with anything, really. When the internet came along, it can be very positive or it can be very negative. Depends on how you're looking and perceiving it. But anyway, onto the fun stuff. Let's not go there at the moment. So OpenAI have released loads of stuff. I think one of the ones that, obviously everybody on YouTube anyway seems to have picked up on is the agent kit. You can build agent workflows. It's good, but it's more of a workflow process than like it's almost like the agent bit is just a side part of it. But again, it's amazing, and if you need to build this stuff, but you can see where lots of commentators are saying, like OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, they've done this for decades now. It's like they're creating their own, I wouldn't say walled garden because it's not quite as bad as that, but they're creating their own platforms for sure. And OpenAI, for sure, is becoming, and is, I don't think there is any question anyway, it is a platform. It isn't just a chatbot now. And so Agent Kit lives in the OpenAI world, as it were. And yeah, I think for a lot of people that don't mind having it's a bit like when you use Microsoft Azure or Google or AWS for all your compute, resources. At some point, you're putting unless you're going to deploy a server at home, who wants to do that? Or maybe you do, but crikey, you've got to know so many things these days to make it secure and whatnot, don't you? I'm not saying it's impossible, but for the average Joe and certainly the average company, I don't know, unless they've got specialists that can look after that stuff. So you're putting your work onto their platform. So Agent Kit definitely looks really cool. I must admit, when you see the demos and stuff, and I think it's a positive thing for especially small businesses, and even personal stuff and medium businesses. You can achieve a lot of stuff, but the ownership is there, isn't it? It's on that OpenAI platform. You're paying that monthly fee. As soon as you stop doing that, it goes away. So a lot of people said, oh, it's like NA10, which I've spoken about many times, for the workflow integration platform with agents and all the rest of it. I still think NA10, Zapier and Make and all those things are really good. But I don't know. It's just NA10 just has that. It's open source for one, so you can use their hosting on the cloud, but you can literally host it like I do. I've got it on Docker and local, and I use Cloudflare tunnels to tunnel in securely, basically. But you can also host this on a fairly reasonably cheap VM in the cloud. I'm using Amazon Lightsail because I did look at HostingGo, which they've got a specific NA10 hosting, and it looks really cheap. But you've got a commitment usually for a year or two. You can do it monthly, but then it starts to ramp up anyway, and you think, well, okay, it's still a little bit cheaper than hosting with NA10 themselves, but I like the fact that NA10, you don't obviously NA10 own the software, but it's open source. You can control where it is. You can run it internally in your network. You can run it externally, and it isn't really too big a deal to set up. There's a bit of technical sort of knowledge needed. And yes, I am going through a course at the moment. There's loads of these out there, by the way, so it's not exactly rocket science, this stuff. But there are some I'd like to think, I've got my own perspective of setting it up and things like that. So using something like Cloudflare tunnels, even if you've got a VM hosted in the cloud, you still want to make sure that's as secure as it can be. But NA10 gives you a lot more flexibility at the moment than AgentKit. But and the fact that you can own where that lives, basically. So that's quite important. But again, for average people who just want to build agents, that's an amazing platform. So, but there's obviously loads of stuff that OpenAI came out with. But the other one, as a sort of developer, that jumped out is apps in ChatGPT. So, they've done this, like all of them have tried. There were in ChatGPT, there were the GPTs, wasn't it, where you could create your own GPT. And look, there's value in that. Again, not knocking it, but it sort of didn't quite get the traction. Everybody said originally it was going to become the App Store for AI, but it sort of didn't, did it really? But I can see the apps in ChatGPT, they've got the apps SDK, which is really quite important. And one of the big things there is that it's an SDK, a software development kit. So you can use it in your own software. You can build your own apps using it. Okay. You can run it locally to develop at least, but there are some caveats there. But the whole point is that it sounds like OpenAI are, and they're going to open up this. So at the moment it's in development beta type thing, but they are going to open up so that you can essentially get your AI app published and monetized. So it looks like they really are going for the App Store type mentality there. Hey, nothing wrong with that as well. Everybody wants to earn a little bit of extra cash. There's obviously going to be a lot of slop with it, of course, but there's also going to be, I think, quite interesting applications being built there. So that is really quite powerful. And by the way, not to be outdone, Claude, the other Anthropic AI, very powerful. People who came up with the idea of MCP, Model Context Protocol. And by the way, in the apps SDK, it's all MCP driven as well. So luckily, which they did say a long time, well, I say a long time ago, certainly earlier this year, OpenAI, that is, that they were going to adopt MCP like Microsoft have and, most other platforms, because it's a uniform standard way of AI LLMs talking to tools like other applications. So rather than having to invent the wheel every time, you can use MCPs to talk to existing applications like Salesforce or whatever. So that is in the Apps SDK, which is I think quite an important thing. But the fact that you can actually build apps and potentially make some money out of them, I'm certainly interested in that. But anyway, yeah, there's loads of stuff. Codex is now generally available. But yeah, sorry, back to Claude, because Claude, again, fairly recently, I'm not exactly sure when, but fairly recently of the time of this recording, have got an SDK as well. So yes, you could use Claude Desktop to interact with MCP local servers using SDIO, they call it. But they've got the SDK as well. So you can use TypeScript and Python, and I think they've got a C# library as well. I think it's in beta at the moment. But again, you've now got the same as like ChatGPT, OpenAI. They've all got SDKs that you can use locally in your application. So yeah, there's, and I know Gemini and all the others are doing this as well. So it's not to say that these are the only two. But Codex, which is their coding platform like Claude Code or GitHub Copilot. I think GitHub Copilot, I think people are, I'm not protecting Microsoft here. I mean, I work in a Microsoft world, so, there we go. But I think people miss the GitHub Copilot, the fact that it's open source anyway, but also there's a free version. I mean, I pay the, whatever it is, $10 US a month for GitHub Copilot Pro. But even the free version and the GitHub models, you can access all these real top models. Everybody's going, oh, well, I'll subscribe to that one or subscribe to that one or subscribe to... You know, in GitHub Copilot, you get like Claude Sonnet 4.5, which is the latest one. You've got GPT-5, you've got all the other... There's loads of different models that you can choose from. Gemini. It's even got some of the Grok sort of AI models in there as well. And I don't know. I think people miss the point of that, actually. I think, anyway, it's all flavours of ice cream. It's whatever suits individuals, isn't it? But yeah, so loads of stuff happening around that. But another thing that jumped out that hasn't really got, I think, the publicity yet, or maybe it has, and I'm just slow to pick up on the news. But there was a research paper released. I'll put the link to it. If you're mathematically minded, you might get something out of it. Crikey, I tend to blur over after about 2 minutes, but never mind. It's horses for courses, as they say. But this research paper, it's from Samsung, actually, and it's using it's a new AI model called TRM, Tiny Recursive Model. Okay, so why is this a big thing? Because there's all these LLMs. We know LLMs, don't we? ChatGPT or GPT-5, Gemini 2.5, all these large language models. And for doing reasoning, because really the language models, and I'm paraphrasing here, but a lot of these models are really just predicting the next token, aren't they? The next word, the next letter, whatever. But the reasoning models are where they use recursive loops to go back over and check what is going on. That's why a lot of the reasoning models are more expensive, because they're burning through so much more resources, compute and GPUs and all of that sort of stuff. So these reasoning models use this recursive, like hierarchical recursive models. That's what they call them, apparently. But the TRM is, and just to put this into context, so there's a lot of SLMs out there, small language models like Llama, the one from Meta, Llama 3.2, Llama 4, various things. There's Mistral, there's the Microsoft Phi models, PHI, that is, and these are models that you can run locally. And even on my very, very mediocre little mini PC with no NVIDIA graphics card, I'd love one, but they're a bit pricey. So it's a standard sort of AMD CPU Ryzen 7 maybe or something. And I can run using Llama or Azure AI Foundry Local to run these models locally. I can run Llama 3.2 quite comfortably. Mistral, there's a couple of those smaller models that I can run fairly, locally. In fact, I'm using some of those to do some LoRa fine tuning. That's another thing to throw in there. LoRa, who is she? No, it's low rank adaptation. Anyway, there's another whole thing about that, isn't there? But a way of not fine tuning the whole model, but bubbles. That you can specify, that you can add bubbles to the, that's the way I look at it, specific fine tuning without fine tuning the whole model. It's PEFT, PEFT, performance efficient or parameter efficient tuning. And anyway, there's a lot of stuff in that. There's too much to go through, and I'm still going through it myself, actually, trying to get some stuff done. It is actually quite interesting. But LoRa, low rank adaptation, there's a lot of nice mathematics in that as well, if you're interested. And there's QLoRa as well, which is quantized LoRa. And the way I look at that, by the way, is like the old days, where you used to have like a lower quality JPEG image or something to save loading times. Yes, a long time ago. So it was a little bit pixelated, but you could easily see what the image was. Well, that's the quantization that QLaw is doing. You can still get really good results without a lot of overhead because it's quantizing those, number of bits down, smaller and smaller, but you can still get a reasonable answer out of it. Anyway, that's another fork in the road to go down sometime. But back to the TRM. So this research paper is quite impressive because even these SLMs like Llama, Phi, Mistral, Qwen, all of these ones, they're still usually in the high millions of parameters, if not billions of parameters. Certainly the large language models like GPT and Gemini, etc., they're in the billions, if not, I think Grok is trillions of parameters or something. Well, just to put all of that into context, this new research paper, this TRM, this tiny recursive model, has got just 7 million parameters. Okay, that still sounds like a lot, doesn't it? But like I say, put this up against any of those other SLMs and certainly the large language models, and it's trivial, it's minimal, and you absolutely can run it on smaller machines like just your standard laptop, your standard PC, whatever it might be. But it's outperforming on a lot of these benchmarks like ARC, AGI, and there's a few other benchmarks that the industry tend to use. But basically, it's outperforming frontier models like Gemini 2.5, DeepSeek, on tough reasoning benchmarks. It's really up against those large language models, but it's 7 million parameters. But it uses this tiny recursive model. There's a whole thing in the paper. I don't know. You need a math brain, for that, I think. But it does go through and explain why and how and all that sort of stuff, and how these hierarchical reasoning models, the HRMs, like the reasoning models that the GPT's got, DeepSeek and a few others and all the rest of it, how the recursive nature works on those things versus this TRM. But yeah, it's quite incredible. So, it really is actually the TRM model capability is it's not just feasible to run on your local laptop. It's kind of the whole point. And you can actually get you've got faster inference speed when you're asking prompts. So you've got really, because of the small size and the recursive loop architecture, TRM can iterate quickly without the memory bottlenecks of the deep transformer stacks, basically. But there's a trade-off, as always. But when you put it up against like a lot of these even SLMs, the small language models, it is quite impressive what they're showing. I haven't actually used it myself personally yet, but I'm going to keep an eye on this one for sure. But yeah, you can run it on the hardware requirements is like an 8 to 16 gig RAM. Any modern i5, i7 Apple Silicon chip, my trusty little AMD Ryzen 7 should be fine. GPU's optional, but yeah, but even the base level sort of CPUs should breeze through the TRM inference. So isn't it? Yeah, it's amazing. That's what I mean. Always a double-edged sword, but it's incredible the way that it's that it's going. So yeah, so I think the TRM stuff, when it get chance to look at it, it looks like we can convert the models to a GGUF format, which is used by Llama. You can use a framework like PyTorch or Onyx, or ONNX. That, I think ONNX is what Azure Foundry Local use to run models locally. I've got a feeling Olama can as well, or something, or does a conversion. But anyway, but yeah, you can quantize it even for faster local inference. So you can even get to 4-bit or 18-bit. So this is all the floating point bits of all these vectors floating around in higher dimensional space, apparently. But anyway, you know, I'm just digging through the surface in all of this. Like I say, I wish I'd become a mathematics genius when I was 8 or something. I think that might have helped. But anyway, but there are some amazing things happening, and scary amount of power and water usage to power all this stuff. But maybe the weird thing is, it's a little bit like cars. The combustion engine, oil and fossil fuels and all that sort of stuff, and then we're seeing electric and maybe hydrogen based and all this stuff. Maybe there's always this sort of peak of, oh, that doesn't look good, and then it drops away, and we eventually evolve to get really sort of streamlined things. I think how far electric cars have come along. It's just incredible, even in a few years. So maybe the AI stuff, like the massive large language models, they'll still be around and they'll still be needed for certain things, I'm sure. But maybe these small language models and these TRM models, the tiny recursive models, maybe where they start working on reasonable hardware that virtually everybody's got at home, then maybe, I don't know, maybe for a lot of, because let's face it, for the most use that people are doing, apart from doing these Sora 2 videos and VO3 videos, for a lot of things that people want AI to help them with, like, documents and all of this stuff, that can be done on a local machine. That's what the Microsoft Copilot Plus PCs are. They've got the NPUs in them. So not only you've got a CPU and a GPU, you've got an NPU, the neural processor unit, that's dealing with those. That's why the GPUs have been really good with the floating point the mathematic algorithms. But with the NPU, it's more integer based, I suppose, isn't it? But anyway, you can run these models locally. And I think with these things like TRM, etc., I think maybe that's what's going to happen. There's going to be there's been this big, like massive resource hungry sort of LLMs, but I think we're probably going to settle to somewhere in between, where most of the laptops and machines that we use on a day-to-day basis, including our phones, are really just going to have local AI built into them, which they already have anyway, haven't they? But you know what I mean? They're going to settle and become more predominant in average machines, and then the LLMs are going to be there for some of the big grunt work, in the back end. But anyway, an exciting, interesting time for sure. It's way over 5 minutes. Wow, this is nearly 30 minutes. If you've made it this far, I don't know, you deserve a medal. I should send you a medal if you've got this far. Anyway, that's what I've got. So I'm going to stop talking and yapping on about stuff, and I hope you have a good day, a good week, wherever you are, and we'll catch you on the next one.